Are the White Sox on the cusp of having the worst four-year stretch of baseball in the modern era? My guest posed that interesting question that we'll discuss next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fan Side Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. And you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the White Sox have lost 222 games over the past two seasons. They're almost halfway to the 452 games the New York Mets lost between the 1962 and 1965 season. And joining me to talk about the Sox threatening to have even more of a rough stretch than the Mets did, along with the front office changes and share some Sox memories, is Besnik Zekiri, better known as Bez from OnTapSportsNet. Hopefully I didn't butcher your name again, but I went with Bez. And Bez, what got you thinking the White Sox could possibly threaten to be even worse than the Mets' terrible stretch in the 60s?
Todd, thanks for having me on. Bez works. I appreciate that. Glad to be back here again. Well, the first things first here. We broke their record, the 62 Mets, for most losses. They still had a worse winning percentage. Never let anybody forget that it was the fifth worst season in winning percentage in Major League Baseball history and not the worst by winning percentage. So if the Mets, half that team is probably dead, but get it back out there and play those two games and we'll settle it once and for all. But you're talking 121 losses. Garrett Crochet is our best player. He is probably most likely, almost assuredly getting traded this offseason. So bye-bye to your best pitcher. And then Luis Robert, there's a chance he might get dealt, although I think that probably happens more like mid-season. So if you're losing those two, or at least one of those guys before the season starts, you're replacing him with a prospect, most likely. And I don't see any upgrades happening at any position on from the 121 loss team. So I have very little reason to believe that this isn't another 110 loss team.
Yeah, and the one thing that got me when I saw that tweet too, because I was just going to have you on to talk about the offseason, then I was looking, I'm like, my gosh, the Mets not only were an expansion team, but they were terrible for five of their first six seasons. But then they went through that 452 game stretch, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's very quite possible that the Sox are going to match that because, unlike where the Mets were just an expansion team where it was hard to get off the ground, the Sox are going to be not getting off the ground because they're just not going to spend any money on the offseason.
Exactly. We are already back-to-back 100-loss seasons. That's the first time in franchise history in 124 seasons. That's the first time they went back-to-back over 100. And I don't know about you, buddy, but I don't see this team winning the 63 games that they need to win to avoid a third straight 100-loss season. So we're right there in the depths of hell with a expansion team from the 1960s. It's I know exactly how we got here, and I don't see any influx of talent coming from the free agent pool. So
what about the Garrett Crochet trade market, though? Let's say by some chance the Boston Red Sox do get this desperate to give up like Weiler Abreu or some of the other names that are either at or close to the big league level that they're talking about. Does that maybe change their fate, at least maybe say in 2026?
I think so. I think then, you kind of have an idea of what you've gotten from that trade. Wilyer Abreu came in third in the Rookie of the Year. He's a Gold Glove right fielder. He's immediately our best player, not named a healthy Luis Robert. So that's a big pickup. And then you get a premium prospect maybe to go along with them. A couple of guys that we've got going up. The thing is all those prospects are unknown. Don't fall in love with the top 100 rankings like we once did long ago with the likes of Yoan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez. None of these guys are sure things. So if they make an immediate impact and we can tell right away that these guys are going to be everyday solid major league players, then we might have this might happen a little bit faster than it looks like it's going to happen right now.
How about those to the eternal optimists though that are saying, well, they got a lot of starting pitching depth, and I agree that they have a lot of very exciting young arms, especially with the volume that it's like they should be at least 5 guys that should be able to put together a cheap, effective starting pitching rotation, because the Sox don't spend money on starting. But at the same point, starting pitching is only going to be able to keep you in games, as we saw. You're probably still going to lose 100 games, but do you think maybe we should be hopeful that a lot of these young arms could give the Sox a chance to get to those maybe 63 wins in, say, 2026?
Sure. And, that's the thing where you've got some of these leadership changes that Chris Getz has brought in with Brian Bannister, now with Ryan Fuller, their new director of hitting development. They've already had Josh Barfield overseeing the farm system. They've made all these changes on the international scouting side. Something like that takes, 5 to 7 years to really bear fruit. But the organizational infrastructure is changing. They're making moves that look like smart moves on paper and look like there's well-regarded people that actually want to come and work for the Chicago White Sox. We can talk about why that may or may not be. But those are good things, especially on the pitching side. Like you said, there's a lot of up and coming talent. So hopefully they can move the needle a little bit on that side of things, but they can't pitch negative runs. Last season was the worst offense. 107 runs scored was the lowest since another expansion team, the 1969 Padres, who scored less than 500. And that was in the dead ball era. You have to score runs. Okay. We can talk about hustle and small ball and grinder ball. That can only get you so far. And we don't have a Wheeler. We don't have an Aaron Nola. We don't, we have a guy who's close to one of those and he's moving along. But maybe the depth top to bottom on the pitching side is going to build up into something nice in a couple of years. We've got a lot of just young, talented players. We just don't know what they are or what they're going to become.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you brought that up because, even I've talked to, some of these guys that are very, that they put the comments, for example, in the YouTube community page about how, well, they got the starting pitching. And if you just add a few more bats, but it's like, it's really hard in this day and age to add impact bats. It's one of the reasons why Garrett Crochet, at least from a logistical standpoint, has to be traded. It's sad that he has to also be traded because they just don't want to pay him, but it's very hard to get impact bats. So you could say, even Cleveland, I like that the Sox are building up at least the young pitching like Cleveland has, but Cleveland has Jose Ramirez still. They still have, Stephen Kwan, and they still have Naylor. The Sox need at least 3 or 4 bats. Do you see, because I know how much you love to talk about prospects, do you see that there's even anything remotely close that could say, hey, there's a couple of guys here that's definitely going to, 2025 is going to be bad, but at least we can avoid that, number 4-year stretch where it's another 100 loss season.
You got to hope that a guy like Ryan Fuller comes in and he can identify things that have been going wrong, or the way that players are being developed in the minor leagues even at the pro level, like a guy like Andrew Vaughn. Maybe he can spot something and say, here's how we get you to pull the ball more. Here's how we get you to lift the ball more. And hopefully he can do those things. Then I still don't think he's a long-term piece. And then you've got your Colson Montgomery, your Brian Ramos. They're unknowns. And the starting pitching is unknown too. You can't just pencil those in and say, oh yeah, we're good on the pitching side. No worries. We've got this taken care of. You can do whatever you want. People can fan the way they want. I'm not telling anybody how to root for their favorite team. But for me, I'm very skeptical that we can just say, oh, we've got the pitching covered. We've got the pitching talent, but we don't have the pitching at the major league level yet. So unless Colson Montgomery or Edgar Caro or Brian Ramos, I don't know. Let's see what they got. That's what we're going to find out this year, if we've got any middle of the lineup bats.
Yeah, they're nice pieces, and I like how you brought that up. Fan how you want. The one thing that I sometimes get pushed back when I try to get my hopes up about, well, yeah, they could be competitive by 2027, because you really only need, like, if you have 3 bats, like if Ramos, Caro, and Montgomery can be those guys, yeah, your fortune should be turning around. But it's still one of those things where nothing has been ever guaranteed. When was the last time the Sox had somebody that came up and fulfilled their prophecy? Basically, it seems like a generation that's happened.
It was the 2019 Eloy season. Like, he played, I think, 120 games. He hit 30 home runs. And we thought he was the guy. He was going to be a guy. People were predicting he'd be the first player in franchise history to hit 50 home runs. And even then, that was 5 years ago, and that was only him. So yeah, it takes time. And if there was an article on Fangraphs the other day, I reposted it, where one of their prospect analysts kind of went through each team's like top 2 guys or top 2 position players that, you should see this year. And one of them was Colson Montgomery. And it was like, he's got the talent, but it's clear he's going to need some time. That's coming from the experts. So, I hope people realize this is going to be a minute until we're out of the depths of hell.
Well, speaking of a minute, last time I had you on, everydayers might remember, we were talking about the international scouting department getting revamped, but the changes bearing fruit were going to take a while. So again, more front office changes that I want to discuss with you after the break about maybe at least won't be 7 or 8 years. I want to get your take on that, Bez, after the break, and we will be back on Locked On White Sox. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I always maintain FanDuel spreads, over-unders, and money lines are fun to play, but if you want to win big or at least double your money, FanDuel's parlays, props, and futures is the way to go. And a popular parlay ahead of Chicago and Detroit's Thanksgiving matchup is Detroit's first and second quarter spread of -3.5 hitting, along with the third and fourth quarter spread of -2.5 hitting. And if that hits at plus 1,151 and you put, say, $10 on it, it'll pay out $115.16. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms, so make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. And joining me on the show is from OnTapSportsNet, my man, Bez. And Bez, where can we find your great content?
You can find all my writings on OnTapSportsNet in our White Sox section. We've got you covered there for the day-to-day game recaps, in season trades, speculation, opinion pieces. It's all there.
Yeah, and also follow you at Sox Insane on Twitter and Blue Sky. If your guys are starting to migrate there, you're one of the best Sox social media followings, in my opinion. You're up there with the 4 from the 108 guys, all that stuff. It's the only reason why I think I'm still on Twitter or X or whatever is because of the Sox social media community. If that starts to get really terrible, I think I'm going to have to stick to Blue Sky then.
Yeah, I'm kind of riding the line. Using both apps. So I agree with you there. If it goes kind of down the hill on X, then I might make the permanent switch. But yeah, B-EZ at bsky.social if you're a Blue Skyer.
All right. So Will Venable has been named the new manager. We already talked about Ryan Fuller in the previous segment. The analytics department has supposedly been reformed. Will adding a new hitting philosophy and having a manager who embraces data and analytics maybe bear results quicker than, say, improving the international scouting?
Probably. I would hope so. I would hope that, you've got the right manager here. Of course, we see this. We've seen this in baseball. We see this in football, especially, I think, every offseason with the coaching carousel. And there's some hot new coordinator on the offensive side or defensive side who everybody wants to be the next head coach. And it's very hit or miss. I mean, not a lot of people are cut out for that job. And unfortunately, any of the good or great managers, they're not unemployed. So it's really hard, and you've got to hope that Will Venable is that diamond in the rough. And as everybody has said, he's got this ridiculous resume of people he's worked with and winning organizations, and hopefully some of that can rub off on all of our players who are coming up, becoming big leaguers for the first time. He's been through it, and he knows what it looks like as a player and what it looks like from the outside looking in.
Isolating out the Orioles, kind of swoon hitting and August and September. One of the reasons why Ryan Fuller kind of maybe moved on. Who are you excited to see Fuller work with, whether it's prospect wise, whether it's in the lineup? Because it seems like that might be the biggest move. I know Austin Slater was their top free agent target, but it seems like bringing in Fuller and bringing in Venable, that's going to be their big moves.
I agree. And I would like to see if Ryan Fuller can figure something out with Miguel Vargas, because good Lord, was that bad after he came over in that trade. He might have hit below 100. I would have to look that up again. If it wasn't below 100, it was like low hundreds. So you've got to turn this guy into something. That trade is looking really bad on paper. It didn't look good the day it happened, and now it looks much, much worse. So hopefully he sees something in Miguel Vargas that he can fix and turn him into a productive bat and a productive everyday player. It doesn't have to be a middle of the lineup bat, but just an average everyday Major League Baseball player. I hope I have some hope there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think gets overlooked in how far the Sox have fallen is they also just don't have a lot of like 2F4 players, or the 1.5s, the 2 guys, and
exactly.
They need those guys. And so if you can get Miguel Vargas, I know it's not like, oh my gosh, we gave up, we missed the boat on the Fetty trade, but if you can still reclaim Vargas to just be a 1.5 2F4 player, they need more of those guys too. It's not just, hey, you need impact bats. You need you need productive bats. You can no longer have replacement level, like saying Andrew Vaughn, because I think pulling the ball would definitely help Andrew Vaughn. But my fear is, I was looking at his splits too, is if he doesn't have the count in his favor, it's game over. Like, he is definitely not going to be able to hit. So I don't know if Fuller can fix him there. But I would also like to see Fuller work with some of the other prospects too. Like, I'm looking, we've talked about George Wolcole. I'd like to see him cut down on the strikeouts. That would be a guy that I like to see him work with. It's just, I think how important is it for the Sox to finally say, we need to be hitting and pitching from the rookie ball all the way up to big league ball?
Yeah, I mean, that's that development starts there at an organizational level. It's not produced the consistent results that a team like the White Sox, who has self-imposed financial restrictions from the owner and isn't going to go out there and spend on impact talent, because the price of poker has gotten way too high for the chairman. So you've got to be a powerhouse at developing players, and it starts from the day that they walk through the door. Whether you've drafted them or traded for them, signed them in the international market. It starts, all of those issues, all of those things that we continue to see at the major league level are things that are much easier to fix when they're still pretty raw and green. So I think that stuff like that, again, it takes some time to bear fruit, but on paper, it looks like they're making the right moves.
All right, so since wins won't matter for at least the next 2 seasons, what standards are you holding Will Venable to see if he's successful?
I want to see the everyday lineup construction and seeing just how he's putting together his lineup card in terms of just who's in the field, the batting order, and of course pitching decisions, and how he manages his starting rotation, how he manages the bullpen, when he calls on certain guys, and why. It's going to be hard to tell, though, at least in this first year, because we have so many unknowns in, on the position side, in the bullpen, in the starting rotation. So some of it is going to be, this toss up. Is it, Are we still figuring out if the player's any good? And that's why we can't tell if Venable has this figured out yet. So there's some back and forth there in terms of like it kind of clouds the judgment around Venable. But long term, it'll be wins and losses. This year, it'll be just kind of like the tactical stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see, are you losing games just because you were overmatched? That's kind of what I'm looking at, and obviously he's going to make some errors in the beginning,
Sure.
maybe some bad decisions, but is it just because, you lost the game because you were out talented, not because you were, basically Pedro Grifol. I mean, he was a net negative manager. He's probably the most net negative manager I ever saw, especially with a lot of his decisions and a lot of his baffling. The other thing is I just don't want to see a culture of, well, let's just flush it. We lost 10-1.
Right.
Let's just flush it. Like, yeah, it's a grind. You can't hold on to it, but you can't just be like, well, it's gone. Like, learn from it. That's kind of the things that also I want to see is if you're getting crushed, are guys getting held accountable? That's another thing.
Exactly. The guys being held accountable. I think, they've got a whole bunch of players who have minor league options that they can send back down to the minors. If that's what accountability looks like, great. I'm all for that. The other thing I want to see is I want to just see the fundamentals cleaned up. I am so sick of getting just thrown out on the bases, like just baffling kind of base running decisions, plays in the field where it's just, you're throwing to the wrong base. You're not hitting the cutoff man. Like we've watched that for at least the last 2 years. That probably goes back further than that. So if that's his influence, great. That's one place he can make an immediate impact in my book.
Yeah, can you just get rid of the White Sox being a metaphor for not only just being bad, but for being like Miguel Vargas running into Andrew Benintendi and almost giving himself a concussion, like that type of stuff? Yeah, I totally agree with that. Can you just, like I said, if you're going to lose, it's just because you were out talented, not because you beat yourself, not because you threw to the wrong guy or you had Andrew Benintendi float a ball home. Like, can you get Andrew Benintendi to at least throw the ball to the cutoff man? I don't care if the run scores. Throw the ball to the cutoff man because you don't have a gun, Andrew Benintendi.
Right. Keep the guy that was going to get to second. Keep him there instead of letting him get to third because you bounced it 3 times to get to home.
Yeah,
drives me nuts.
And also had the hang time of like a punt that Devin Hester would have fielded and taken to the house. Well, it's Wayback Wednesday, and hey, after the break, it's Bez and I. We're just going to go over some great White Sox memories, and we'll be back on Locked On White Sox. Welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all my everydayers. Appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. And again, here with Bez from OnTapSportsNet, writes great content for the White Sox. You can follow him at Sox Insane on Twitter. And also, you've migrated over to Blue Sky. And if anybody says, well, hey, Blue Sky, look at what's your political... my political affiliation is the Chicago White Sox. And also, I just like peace and quiet sometimes. I don't need to deal with the trolls. And so far, Blue Sky there's not a lot of trolls there.
And no ads or algorithm that is boosting content that is completely irrelevant to me. Of course, maybe that doesn't last and, they have to monetize some things to keep the lights up and running. But so far, so good. I'm with you on that part. I joined the site a year ago. And now there's more people on there, so it's great. So I'm on there a little more frequently.
Oh, you were one of the lucky ones that got like the code?
I got a code, yeah. I think they're up to like 30 million users, and mine was like, I was like user number like 200,000 or something. So, maybe one day that'll mean something, but probably not.
You can go around saying you're the OGs.
Yep.
Well, tonight will be the day most people get together at the bar reminiscing, and I got a feeling at some point random ball players and moments will come up because you can never you can separate the boy from his longtime reliever, but you can never separate the memories. So, Bez, let's get some of your favorite Sox memories or players, and hey, let's just shoot from the bleep in this final segment.
So the first thing I think of is like a Cubs Sox memory. So Cubs Sox, this was 2003. And this was like only 6 years after interleague play started. So interleague play for one generated a lot of buzz, and the Cubs and Sox were playing each other, and neither team had won a World Series yet. For me, that was the Cubs-Sox rivalry, was like, neither team has won in a long time. We got to win one before they do. We got ours. That's awesome. Then I stopped caring about the Cubs and obsessing about them. I used to be one of those people. But it was a walk-off. Cubs tied it in the top of the ninth at home. And then in the bottom half, Jose Valentin hits a walk-off home run off of Antonio Alfonseca. That was wild. That was pandemonium. Before 05 or the blackout game or, the Leary game, that was the loudest I've ever heard that park. And it might have been before the renovations took out the top 4 rows of the upper deck. So there was 5,000 additional people in there than there would be now. That place was loud. And we used to do the Jose, 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 Jose chant. And it was walking out of that place it was deafening, and how loud people were cheering that. So that was a good time. And Valentin is one of my favorite players ever. As much as I love Alexi Ramirez, that 2000 White Sox team that he was on, where he just came over from the Brewers and just mashed the ball. Not great defensively, but you could look past it when you hit 25 home runs and steal 20 bases and hit 280. So I was a big fan of him. Probably, in my opinion, he played a lot of third base too, so you could say he's not a shortstop. But he's probably my favorite White Sox shortstop in my lifetime. I was still kind of young for Ozzie, and Ozzie wasn't really a hitter. He was in there for his defense. But that was that memory always comes to mind.
Yeah, and
Sox.
Yeah, the other thing is about that, Jose Valentin, that trade was amazing because they got, him and Cal Elger that year for Jamie Navarro. They were able to get rid of, now that Jamie Navarro's $38 million salary. I remember that was one of the absolute worst free agent signings. And I think that's what started to scare Jerry Reinsdorf even more. Granted it was the 3 years, but I think it was, he gave him 5 years. I think that was the first time he gave someone 5 years. I remember he would never give anybody 5 years. Not Jack McDowell, not Alex Fernandez. And I think he finally gives it to Jamie Navarro of all pitchers. And that was just a terrible signing from the start, especially since I believe Kevin Tapani goes over to the Cubs. It's kind of like a swap, and he pitches great for them. Mm-hmm. So I remember that 2003 Cubs White Sox that's a great memory for me too. I remember going to the Sox Cubs game. I think it was the Saturday day game. I was with my dad at Wrigley. We were drinking old style, and I remember I think it was Matt Clement gave up 7 runs. Cubs rally back though to make it 7-6. It was one of the most tight back and forths. But the other thing I remember from that 2003 season was I was at Marquette University. So I had some friends that were from the north side there too, and the Cubs are in the playoffs, and they're trying to tell me how much the Sox suck because the Sox only won 86 games that year, but happened to play in the Central with the Twins. They win the division. The Cubs played in, the division was terrible for them, so they get in at 88. And I'm like, it's 2 totally different leagues, and the Sox won.
It was 2 games
series, yeah, and you're better than the Sox by 2 games. I remember being so the Bartman was so he obviously didn't cost him the series, but that was just so poetic how they ended up just unraveling right after that, on that. And I just, for the amount of stuff that I had to eat in that 2003 playoff run, I was so happy that the Cubs lost. Now I'm like you, I have no problem. I had no problem that they won in 2016 because the thing about the Cubs is they actually had good human beings on that team. That 2003 team, you had Sammy Sosa, who, come on, there's no way you could believe he was clean. No way.
No, he wasn't. There's not a chance. Granted, it's been a long time now, and I think that, Sammy hit so many home runs for them. He's an all-time favorite, I'm sure, amongst the North Side faithful there. Bring him back. They haven't honored him or done anything for him. He wasn't clean, but yeah, I was not a fan of Sammy, although that was another bad White Sox move, is trading him for a washed up George Bell. That one didn't work out too well either.
Although the thing is, Walt Henrich totally screwed up Sammy Sosa. That was one of the few guys that he couldn't work, that just his way of hitting just didn't work. And also, does Sammy discover the free weights? Remember, it was free weights for Sammy. He went to the North Side and Flintstone vitamins. Does he discover that on the South Side? Although the greatest troll the Sox could ever do. Like, I know Jerry loves to now be inferior to the Sox, or he hates that feeling to the Cubs. But the greatest troll job you could ever do is bring back Sammy Sosa to the South Side for a day. Like, I just thought about
Just
that.
one day contract to retire as a White Sox.
Yeah. And honor his, I think it was his 12 career home runs that he had with the White Sox or something. I think he had, because I remember he had like 8 home runs in 91. And I do remember when he was traded, like, I think I was like 11 or 12. So like, I was starting to really understand baseball even more, but I was like, yeah, I could see him going to the North Side and hitting 25 because probably they'll fix his swing. But I was like, the moment he hits like 60 and 66, I'm like, where the heck was this on the South Side?
Right. And he would have probably been like a 25, 30 homer guy without, some help.
Yeah.
And, and the juiced ball and everything. It was crazy. It was nuts when, hitting 50 home runs was kind of like, meh, where it was, before it was like a feat. I remember when Cecil Fielder did it in like 91 or 92. And that was like, he was the first one to hit 50 in a long time. Now it happens pretty much every year or every other year.
Dude, I remember when Ivan Calderon led the team, and I think it was like with 20 home runs. And I remember everybody being like, he barely just got the 20 home runs or something like that. Like, that's why, like, in 2023 when you had, or 2022 when you had Andrew Vaughn with what, 20 or 17, it was like Ivan Calderon produced better power numbers. Like, I remember that. Like, that's why. Put the ball in the air, White Sox.
Yeah, seriously. It's so bad. It's tough watching those guys hit, especially. That's another thing is, maybe you can't fix the guy's swing, but maybe you can teach him how to be better at laying off pitches, because these guys chase. It's just, high outside. Like, they don't seem like they've ever seen a pitch that they don't like. Nobody takes pitches, nobody walks. And when you watch, if you watch the playoffs, if you watch the World Series, those were teams that were tough to pitch to, because they, if you're not throwing strikes in the strike zone, they're not swinging. They're not getting themselves out. And that's what it takes.
Yeah, I do. Like, when you do hear Ryan Fuller and you go back to even just before his press conference, he does believe in, hard contact, launch the ball, and he believes in, you got to control the strike zone. And like you said, like, when I was looking at Andrew Vaughn's number, like when the count is 3-1, like his on base percentage is ridiculously high. So it's like, keep working the count. But again, once he gets to 1, even 0-1, 0-2, 1-2, he's basically an automatic out, because he's going to go into chasing. And imagine if you had an analytics department to even point that out to somebody. Like, I can go on Baseball Reference and map that together and be like, hey, if Andrew pulls the ball more and gets ahead of the count, he's a successful hitter. Why did they have that there?
Yeah, it's just all these things that just are just so painfully obvious. It's like, I'm glad they finally did these things, but it was just like, okay, anybody who was watching, any of us, just fans sitting at home, we knew you guys had to do something 10 years ago. So now they're just catching up to like where a lot of teams have been for a decade. So, that'll probably take time, but hopefully figure out a way to make some short-term impact. But I was thinking, what's another one of Sox memory for you?
Really quick before we wrap up, I'm gonna always say, just getting out of a sexual harassment training, the blackout game in 2008. I was working at WTMJ and I worked evenings, so I had to go to this sexual harassment training from 8 to 10. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I'll miss game one. I mean, because I'm thinking the White Sox, they always break my heart. Outside of 2005, they're going to break my heart when it comes to the Twins. So I get out. So I get out of it, and I'm like, they won. They won. I'm like, and I had to sit through this training about oh my gosh. And I was sitting in this training with conservative talk show hosts. Okay, that's the other thing, because it was a conservative talk. Like, it was. I mean, I couldn't believe it. But went back. I had it DVR'd, and on some bad days, I turn on the Jim Tomei home run and watch that, on repeatedly, because I still don't think that ball is dropped. But that, and I've always said too. I mean, just my dad could be a real big, jerk type guy. He'd rule the house by fear. But whenever I went to Old Comiskey with him and then when it was New Comiskey, I didn't have to be afraid of him. So just going to those games and watching Jack McDowell get in a fight with Mookie Wilson live at that was also a great memory of mine. I think it was 91 or 92 where there's a bench clearing brawl.
Oh, nice. No, I've yet to see a bench clearing brawl. The closest I came was, you remember the Tony La Russa ran out from the dugout to check on Jose Abreu. Remember he did that little scoot?
Yeah.
I was there for that game. But I've never seen that an on-site on-field brawl.
Oh yeah, it was a brawl. The crowd almost turns into a hockey crowd where they're just screaming like, get up,
banging on the glass.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think it was even retaliation. I think just the ball got away from Blackjack. I don't know if it was just Mookie and Blackjack just didn't like each other. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden it was just this bench clearing brawl, and I think it was when Mookie he hit the Royals or the Blue Jays. It's one of the two, and I just know that all heck broke loose. You had relievers running in. That's the thing that's always cracked me up about bench clearing brawls. What is the reliever going to do? You're running in.
I know. I think it's just like, we got to be out there too. We can't just sit here.
Yeah, we can't sit here. But
we're going to run.
We're going to run, and then we're just going to dive onto this pile or whatever. It just wasn't. But I think it lasted a few seconds, and it was over. McDowell got tossed, so did Wilson, so that type of stuff. And even as a kid, then I also didn't realize like how historically significant Mookie Wilson was until later. I'm like, that's the guy from the '86 Mets, and I saw him almost get knocked out by Blackjack McDowell. Well, anyways, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with a discussion on if the Sox have any players we should be thankful for. And Bez, again, where can we find all your great content?
Once again, thanks for having me on, Todd. I appreciate it. Look forward to coming back on these airwaves with you again, my friend. You can find me on OnTapSportsNet on our Sox on Tap section of the website there, and all my opinion, speculation, and day-to-day coverage of the White Sox is there for you. And you can follow me on @SoxInsane on X or B-EZ at bsky.social.
All right, and then feel free to leave comments about today's discussion. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, @ToddJW or @LockedOnSox, or email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.